The Leafs may have finessed the NHL as at the trade deadline towards the back end of it, they acquired Cade Webber in what was at the time a bit of an underrated trade for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And right now, Cade Webber looks to be a very impactful player over the next few years for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he is getting a ton of praise by NHL scouts, NHL analysts, and just everyone in general. So we're going to break that down in this episode of Leafs Digest, as well as some interesting stats regarding Max Domi. He is having a very impactful season so far, so I'm going to break him down as well. But before we do, a quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. We're on the road, and we're very close to 7,000 subscribers. So if you haven't hit that button already, make sure to do that. It means the world to Darius and I. And Darius, let's get into it. We made a video on this guy. We called it a sneaky signing at the time, and a lot of fans weren't too excited with the fact that, the trade they made was Cade Webber. Obviously, they ultimately got a couple of other guys as well, but Cade Webber, very interesting, and the Leafs may have finessed the NHL a little bit with this trade. If you look back, they did not give up very much for him at all, and then you check Twitter today, and he is on the headlines of everything. As you can see here, the Hockey East's best defensive defenseman is Cade Webber. Now, obviously, we're not going to overreact too much. Who knows if it'll actually make a huge impact, but it's fun to talk about him now. And Darius, basically saying never a doubt who's going to get this award. Now, I haven't been watching him a ton, but we knew that he was a defensive-minded big boy going into when we got the trade. But he seems to be kind of, in somehow only a couple weeks, skyrocketing among Leafs fans and among prospect scouts.
Yeah, I think it's, to be expected as well. If anyone gets traded to the Leafs, like they get a bunch of eyeballs. Like the web traffic to his Hockey DB page was probably crazy on trade deadline day. But like we've come to know, and he's a great defensive defenseman. And again, like we don't have to overplay it, but he's won the Defensive Defenseman of the Year award, and he's playing with projected first overall pick this year, Macklin Celebrini too. So that's something to keep of note too. That they have a pretty good team there in Boston, and he's just been fantastic. And I think we called it a sneaky pickup at the time, and I think that's exactly what it is. The only downfall to him is that he doesn't shoot right, but I think he's going to be a pretty good defenseman. He could be an NHL defenseman at some point. And you know what? Honestly, I think he will be an NHL defenseman because I think defense has kind of, which sounds weird, has kind of become like, or has gone on the back burner for defensemen. Like we're seeing a bunch of offensive defensemen in the NHL now, and this guy is just a solid defensive defenseman. So I think at one point, in the near future, we may see him with the Leafs if he continues to develop the way he is. So it's pretty exciting if you're the Leafs or a Leafs fan. Like this is a sneaky good pickup. I'm sure they were keeping tabs on him, and it's nice to see that he's getting all these awards and praise as soon as they picked him up, right? So it's great. I think he'll be pretty good in the future.
I think so as well. We got him for a 6th round pick, which I don't think you could really ask for a better player in the 6th round than what you got from Cade Webber at the deadline. And obviously the Leafs need defensive depth going forward. You look at his stats, he's been with Boston University since 2020. Again, he's not going to put up many goals at all. He scored 1 goal in his 130 games in Boston University. But the Leafs don't really, obviously he's 23 years old, like they need defensive-minded defensemen. Who knows how long until he actually comes up. And we see this tweet here. I was told that the Leafs wasted a bunch of picks at the trade deadline. As it turns out, the Leafs found some gold. And it's kind of funny that, they ultimately traded, whether it was for Lyubushkin and Edmondson, they ultimately traded a bunch of mid picks in the deadline. They never really went for a big trade. And they got Cade Webber, who might end up being, going forward, probably the biggest impact long term for the Maple Leafs. Who knows how long Lyubushkin and Edmondson are going to last. We know Cade Webber is going to be hopefully with the Leafs for a while. I don't know. I'm a bit surprised that that Brad Treliving was able to pull this one off. I don't know do you think that, I don't know, what are your thoughts? Do you think that he's going to be an actual impact over the next 2 to 3 years, or do you think this is just going to be a bit of a hype train now, and then realistically the 6th round pick that they gave up for him and this trade will end up being a wash in like a month?
Yeah, no, I think short term, like again, I don't know what the route is for him at this point. I don't think he's going to be an NHL defenseman in like 2 or 3 years, like you said. Maybe in 3 years, who knows? Because like I said, he's a great defensive defenseman, and I think that's been lost in the NHL recently. So I think he could be with the Leafs eventually. But I think for what they gave up, it's a 6th round pick. 6th round pick is like magic beans, right? Like you don't know what you're going to get with that. And usually it's not a player that really makes an impact usually. And this guy was a 4th round pick in 2019. So obviously he's a little bit older at 23, but he's a big boy. He's a defensive defenseman. He plays physically. So I could see him in the NHL at some point because he's he has all the tools. It's just, can he put it all together and take that step to the next level? So he's still in, school. He's playing for Boston University. I would, take it one step at a time, but I think It's exciting to see because he could end up being a pretty good defenseman for the Leafs in the NHL, and a big impact, quite literally, because he's 6'7" and over 200 pounds. So it'll be fun to watch the development.
Yeah, and the irony is that, I mean, this trade deadline they were looking for, and they acquired defensive defensemen in Lyubushkin and Joel Edmondson, and they also got one. It's almost like they stocked up on 3 of them, and one of them is kind of their future plans. It'll be very interesting to keep up with him, and we'll definitely be keeping up with him over the next several years as he hopefully turns into an NHL defenseman, because the Leafs desperately need them in the pipeline as they continue to grow that the pipeline there. Now, Darius, let's get into this. This is pretty big for the Leafs, and you sent me this interesting stat. And it's time to talk about Max Domi a little bit and just kind of the way the Leafs have been playing as of late, specifically the depth of third and fourth lines here. And you can see this tweet. It's a very long one. I'm not reading out the entire thing. You can pause and read it from Sam. Shout out to him. But the cliff notes of it is basically that the bottom 6 wins you a Stanley Cup. Everyone knows this. And basically goes on to say and highlight the bottom 6 and how it has impacted the Leafs in a positive manner. You're looking at, he highlights Max Domi is a third in 5v5 points per 60 production. Like, Max Domi has been very, very good, almost under the radar good. They've had some other guys as well. Bobby McMahon, when he was, he's very good as well. He's had some very solid games. Like, the bottom 6 for the Leafs have kind of been, obviously the top guys are always going to be the ones that help push them, and they're going to get all the headlines. But Darius, Max Domi, 34 points, 64 games. The bottom 6 for the Leafs has been very good.
Very good. And I think, like, if we want to focus on Max Domi right away, I think he's good for like 50 points on average a year. And he already has, 34 so far this season. So he's doing what we all thought he was going to do, right? Like, he's pretty much doing, he wasn't going to be a point a game player. I don't think he's really ever been, except for 1 year with Montreal, but he had a bigger role. So he's doing exactly what we need him to do on the Leafs. And I think that's great. And like, the tweet mentioned, I know it's a little bit of a cherry pick stat, but when you look at, the Leafs downfall the last couple of years, when the offense dries up from the top guys, the Nylanders, the Marners, the Matthews, the depth scoring hasn't been there. It just hasn't. There's been almost zero. And for the Leafs in the top 10 to have 3 guys currently in that, kind of stat there, to have the depth scoring that good, it's really good heading into the playoffs. They've added some pieces here that can really be an option for them. And one thing I thought was notable too, Bobby McMahon was doing a lot of cardio earlier in the year, just trying to figure out the league. And I mean, he got some time last year, but since probably, I guess, mid-February, if you look at his hockey reference and his game logs, he has been putting in some good numbers and some good games. And he's been up and down the lineup. He's played with Tavares. The last game in Montreal looked like him and Nyes had something going on. So he has been pretty good. And I would look for him to continue to get better at the NHL level and into the playoffs. So it's going to be, like I said, exciting to watch. And Max Domi being third, like, everyone, there's been this whole narrative all year, Max Domi, they need to replace him. He's been pretty good. Like, the stats speak for themselves. He's been really good. So it's nice to see. And Nick Robertson's in there too. I know he's played less sample size of games, but he's in there too. I wonder if he could do something with a little bit of a better opportunity as well.
Yeah, and if we rewind back to when the Leafs were struggling at the start of the season, it kind of switched when that bottom line, specifically Nick Robertson, when he was hot, started to play well, and now it's kind of translated into them really getting themselves in a pretty good spot where they are right now in the standings. But it's going to be very interesting going forward. That'll wrap it up. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this, and if you think that Cade Webber is going to be a big impact player going forward in probably 2 or 3 years, or do you think this will end up being a wash? If you want to check out our video from yesterday, click on your screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow.